Welcome back to the Success Made Simple course. Now, in this video, I want to share with you sort of a concept that a lot of people don't talk about, but it's an extremely important concept. And it's probably the most important concept I'm going to share with you in this course. It's something that if you do not understand and if you do not grasp it and use it effectively, you will not achieve success in any goal that you have. So, what is this concept that is so important that I'm talking about? It is identity. Identity is extremely important. And if you do not get a good grasp on your identity, and if you do not use it to your advantage, you will not achieve whatever it is you set out to achieve. Now, what exactly, let me just zoom out a little bit. What exactly is identity? Identity, if I'm going to sum up overall what identity is, it's how you view yourself. That's kind of the simplest definition I can come up with. It's how you view yourself. It's the set of ideals, beliefs, values, habits, etc., all bundled up into one. That is your identity. And you might be wondering, why is identity so important? Identity is important, and it's the thing that's going to keep you from success, or it's going to be the thing that allows you to get to success. Because your entire life is a series of actions. And I'm sure you understand this. But when you break it down, what exactly do I mean? What exactly does it mean when I say your life is a series of actions? I think there was a good book called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And he said that most people, most humans, I think about 45 to 65% of what humans do on a daily basis is simply a set of habits. So pretty much most of your life is on autopilot. You're not consciously making decisions most of the day. You're simply repeating the same thing day after day after day, 5 to 7 days a week. Now, to some people, this might sound a little bit depressing or upsetting, but there's actually some benefit to this. One of the core benefits of this is once you realize that most of what you do every single day is simply a series of habits, you realize that if you can just tweak your habits, then you end up just tweaking and altering the path of your entire life. Does that make sense? But for example, if you have a habit of eating, say, for example, McDonald's or fast food or just any food in general that are unhealthy for you every single day, if you could manage to snap your fingers and shift that habit and just trade, not the habit of eating, but the habit of eating McDonald's for the habit of eating a salad or just pure protein or something that's much healthier. If the goal is to stay in shape, or if the goal is to get a better physique or lose weight, whatever it is, how much easier do you think that goal would be to achieve? It'd be so much easier. And why is that? Because your habits are different. You didn't actively do anything that dramatically different. You're not going to the gym. You're not working out more. You're not doing extra cardio. But just by changing one simple habit, you can alter the path of your life. And instead of going down the path of unhealthiness by eating junk food or foods with high calories or that's overprocessed, you go down the path of being healthier and potentially losing weight or potentially having a better physique or all of those things. And that's just an example, but hopefully you understand kind of that correlation between tweaking your habits just slightly and the massive impact that it can have on you. Now, your identity is the thing that dictates your habits. So if you end up changing your identity, this is the thing that leads to you changing your life. And it's funny, I remember years ago, I'd read these books about success, about goal setting, about time management, about business, all these things. And one of the things that was super consistent that a lot of people who are already successful kept bringing up was the goal shouldn't be to achieve success. The primary goal should be to become the kind of person who is successful. And it was a weird thing to keep hearing. Like, what does it mean to become the kind of person who is successful? After a few years, I kind of realized what they're talking about. This is it. Become the kind of person who is successful. When you become the kind of person who is successful, that means you're doing certain things on a regular daily basis that leads you to the path that you want to, or leads you to the destination that you want to reach. If you're someone who wants to become a famous basketball player, or not famous, but a skilled basketball player, for example, you got to probably become the kind of person who's a skilled basketball player. Well, what does that kind of person do? He probably practices basketball a lot. He probably practices his dribbling. He probably practices his shooting, his passing, all that stuff. He understands the core fundamentals of the game itself. There's a story about Kobe Bryant. If you get a chance, I highly recommend watching documentaries about Kobe Bryant. I read, I think, 2 books about him in like 2017, kind of like biographies about Kobe Bryant's life. And when he first started playing basketball, like really actively playing basketball, I think he joined some like camp or some competition when he was like 14 or 13 or something like that. And he was terrible. He was just horrible at basketball. And he spent years trying to catch up to everyone else because he said that naturally he just wasn't that good. At the time, he wasn't very tall, of course, because he was a kid. I think his dad was a basketball player, but he just didn't have the raw skills at that time. And so he would spend like a year practicing just one thing, like just one core area of basketball, like the fundamentals is what he calls it. He would just practice the fundamentals, but one specific fundamental every single year, hoping to master that one thing. So for 1 year, he practiced his dribbling. For 1 year, he practiced passing. For 1 year, he practiced shooting. And he would do this so much to the point where, as you know, he is probably one of the best basketball players of all time. He became the kind of person who is a successful basketball player instead of just focusing on becoming a successful basketball player. Does that make sense? Like he's breaking down the core things that make the person who crosses that finish line possible. He's focusing on the core attributes rather than simply the end destination. Hopefully that makes sense. And so that's what I recommend you do as well. Focus on your identity. And if you do that, you achieve the outcome that you want. Now, one of the issues I've seen with people, clients and people I've interacted with, is what a lot of people don't understand is that your identity tends to be given to you by everyone else. For most people, your identity is assigned to you by society in some way, shape, or form. Your identity is assigned to you, or at least different aspects of your identity is given to you by society. And I'll give some examples. Whether you're a Republican or Democrat, for most people, that's given to them. That's an identity that's been given to them. It's been given to them by the people around them. It's been given to them by their friends or family. It's been given to them by the geography where they live. It's something that most people don't actively sit there and rationalize for years, trying to pick apart which is best for them, if either is best for them. Most people just kind of pick their political identity. Most people just pick their political identity simply based on what the people around them tell them to pick. Does that make sense? And this is true with a lot of things. Eagles versus Cowboys, for example. If you're in America and you watch American football, there's a sports team called the Eagles. I'm sure you're aware of them. Another sports team known as the Dallas Cowboys. You pick the team. Your identity in the team is based on where you live, right? Rarely do you see someone who's from Philadelphia who's a fan of the Cowboys. Rarely do you see someone who's from Dallas who's fans of the Patriots or the 49ers, or hopefully you get the point that I'm making. Most people, their identities are assigned to them based on whatever external circumstance exists. Religion, controversial, but another big one. The identity you have with your religion is not based on you understanding all of the religions of the world, picking apart each of the components or aspects of those religions, and picking the one that's best for you. It's usually assigned to you. Most Christians are Christians because they live in a Christian community. They're Christians because their family's Christian. They're Christians because their great-grandfather or their grandfather or their aunts, their uncles, whoever, the school they go to is Christian. Same with Muslim. You're probably Muslim because your family's Muslim, or you live in a Muslim community, or you're from a country where the predominant religion is Muslim. So the same applies. Hopefully you get the point that I'm making. Identities tend to be given to us by external forces. Very rarely do people sit there and choose their identities. And this is why people don't get the lives that they want. It's because they're not choosing the identity that leads them down the path that gets them to the destination that they desire. So how do we do this? How do we change this? I want to share kind of a quick story to kind of really get you to understand just how powerful identity is and what happens to individuals when they do not choose their own identity. I'm going to show you how to choose your own identity in a minute, but I really want to emphasize how dangerous, or I guess the cost of not changing your identity yourself and taking complete control of it. When I was in college, the final major that I kind of landed on was criminology. The goal that I had at the time was to become a lawyer. I was taking the LSATs. I was going to go to Georgetown Law School. That's kind of why I moved to Virginia, because I was going to take classes in DC. And I remember at one point when taking criminology classes, I learned about this concept called, I'll write it down, labeling theory. And it was a very fascinating theory. It's called labeling theory, but it's I would say it's technically beyond the realm of simple theory. It, to a good degree, is just objectively true. But essentially, what labeling theory is, it's sort of this idea that it's dangerous to falsely imprison people or falsely accuse people of crimes. And the reason why it's so dangerous to do this is because what criminologists would notice is that you could take someone who's innocent, who would plead guilty in court, and if you send that person to prison, the chances of them committing crimes after being released dramatically went up. So you might be wondering, well, why is that the case? Why would a person who is innocent start committing crimes after they get out of prison? There's a bunch of factors, but one of the main reasons is because their identity has changed. When you go to prison, you now have a label. That label is that you're a criminal. And because you're a criminal, jobs no longer want to hire you. And because you're a criminal, certain people don't want to be around you. And certain people do want to be around you if you're a criminal. So because you have a certain label, and a label is your identity, because you have a certain identity, you attract certain people and you repel other people, or you attract certain opportunities and you repel other opportunities. And as time goes on, when you begin to attract and repel certain opportunities, these things lead to you engaging in different behaviors. So if you're a dude that went to prison and you get out and you can't find a job, not because you actually did anything wrong to go to prison, but because you pled guilty, you were innocent the entire time, you'll find it hard to find a job, which means you'll find it hard to make money. And when you find it hard to make money, what do? You resort to crime, because it's the only thing that will help you make money when most jobs will not hire you. And ultimately, if you commit a crime, what does that make you? A criminal. Does that make sense? So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's the power of identity. Someone who was not a criminal was called a criminal. His identity was given to him. And because he was given an identity, he ultimately became the thing that he was labeled with. He became the identity that he was assigned with. Again, taking it to sports teams or religion or whatever. When you grew up, you probably didn't actively choose to be these things. Eagles, for example. I'm from Philadelphia. A lot of people I know are Eagles fans. I'm not one, but I'm a little bit different. People I know who are Eagles fans did not sit there and analyze every single team in the NFL and decide, you know what, the Eagles are the best team for me and my personality. They're an Eagles fan because they were born in Philadelphia, because everyone around them were Eagles fans, and because their mom and their dad and everyone around them were Eagles fans. And if you weren't an Eagles fan, you'd probably be judged negatively. So you become an Eagles fan. Now, what happens if you are like me and you say you're not an Eagles fan? You get met with, see if I can scroll down a little bit, hate, or a bit of anger, or a bit of contempt. And when that happens, that creates a feedback loop of don't not be an Eagles fan. Like, I should be an Eagles fan, otherwise people are going to be mad at me and they're not going to like me. So I become an Eagles fan, and what do I get? Positivity. People like it. And you do things to justify your love of the Eagles. Does that make sense? So you'll look up statistics to prove that the Eagles are a good team, even if they're not the best team. Doesn't matter? No. But you're doing whatever you can to justify your beliefs. You're doing whatever you can to justify your identity. Again, this applies to every single type of identity that's given to you. If you go to a certain school, for example, you might not have picked the school. Your parents may have picked the school, wherever you went to high school or wherever you went to grade school. Your parents probably picked it for you. You fall in love with the school, not because you actively made a decision to, but because you're around people who pretty much condition you into having those beliefs. And those beliefs lead to a certain set of behaviors. If people in social school, for example, you might physically get upset. Why? Because it's part of your identity. And if people insult the school, you interpret that as people insulting you. Same is true of the race. I know, we're getting deep into this, but I really want to like hammer down this point that your identity affects the way you think, it affects the way you behave, it affects how you respond to things, it affects everything about your life. And so when you want to change your life, the simplest thing to do is to change your identity, which is something that you can manually change. Now, what I want to share with you is I'm going to consider this is usually like my go-to hack to quickly change your identity. There's a lot of ways to change your identity, but ultimately the main thing to keep in mind when you're trying to do this is sort of this expression. What a lot of people do, for the few people that do come across this kind of like idea of trying to change your identity, what a lot of people try to do is they try to think their way into a new way of acting. So they think in their head, oh, I want to be like this kind of person. And they try to simply do it after thinking about it. But that's hard to do because it's inauthentic, right? If I told you today, you watching this video, if I said to you, hey, I want you to become Casanova. You're a dude watching this. I want you to be the kind of guy who flirts with every girl he comes in contact with. Or I want you to be the kind of guy or girl who is super athletic, who's naturally good at football. You can think about it, but it's hard to go from an action after just thinking. Like you're not going to suddenly be fearless when talking to girls of the opposite sex. You're not going to be just fearless when it comes to playing football or playing whatever your sport of choice is. You can't really think your way into a new way of acting, but what you can do is you can act your way into a new way of thinking. You can act the way someone with a certain identity acts, and by doing that consistently enough, you will, by default, think that way. That's what this means. Act your way into a new way of thinking. So how do we do that? Simplest thing that I recommend people do is dress differently. Now, why do I recommend this? People dress in accordance with their identity. It's true. Next time you're out, look at the way people dress, and I can almost guarantee you'll be able to get a good idea of someone's personality solely based on the way they dress. I guarantee it. And the reason is because you don't wear things that act in opposition of who you are. So I'll give an example of what that means. If you're a girl that's relatively conservative, you're not going to wear things that are super exposing, right? If you're a nun or if you're super Christian, you're probably not going to have your certain body parts exposed. You don't see nuns typically with cleavage. Why? Because it's a dress code that's in opposition with their identity. And the reverse is true. If you're someone who is super liberal, you tend to not dress conservatively. I'm saying tend because there are situations where both things may switch, but they're very rare situations. I'm talking about in general. In the grand scheme of things, when people are left to their own devices, people tend to dress in accordance with how they identify themselves. If you're someone who is really big into rock, for example, there are probably certain outfits that you wear because they're associated with rock. You might be someone who wears flannels. If you're someone who's into like rock music, like the grunge era rock music, you might be someone who wears certain types of boots. You might be someone who wears leather jackets, for example. If you're a hippie, and I don't want these things to sound derogatory at all. They're not. But I'm saying these things because in your mind, me just saying the word hippie gives you a certain appearance in your head. You know what a hippie will look like. You know if it's a dude or a girl, they might wear certain things, maybe certain colors, rainbow colors, for example. Maybe they wear headbands. Maybe they wear, what are those things called? Like bell bottoms, things like that. Maybe they wear baggy clothing. Maybe they wear very tight clothing. Maybe they do certain activities, maybe certain drugs. People dress in accordance with their identity. It's a very easy way to get an idea of how someone thinks simply by looking at the way they dress. I've tried this a lot in my life and it almost never fails. Actually, I can't think of a time where it actually has failed. I'll give you a quick example, actually, just to kind of illustrate this point. When I first went to college, my freshman year, I was looking for people who were like me. And I was looking for people who were really into like anime and comic books, maybe video games, rock music. And one of the guys I met, who to this day is still a good friend of mine, I went to this club and this one guy had really long, like blonde hair. He was wearing like this t-shirt with like an anime character on it, and he had a flannel. And I was like, this looks like the kind of guy who likes like anime, comic books, and rock music. And I was talking to him and I said, hey, do you like this type of music? He's wearing a flannel, so I figured he might like grunge music because a lot of people that like, say, Pearl Jam or Nirvana, Foo Fighters, kind of those late 90s alternative rock bands, they tend to wear those types of things. So I asked him, and lo and behold, he did. So that's an example. You can really get a good idea of people's personalities and the things people like based on the way they dress. If you see someone, for example, who always wears polos, he might be a bit more conservative. If you see, for example, a woman who wears lots of maybe suit pants, she's probably someone who's corporate, or at the very least, she sees herself as someone who's very corporate. She might see herself as someone who's entrepreneurial, or she might see herself as someone who's highly professional. Switch that. If you see someone who wears, say, for example, a girl who wears like very short shorts, or even a guy, very short shorts, maybe they expose their legs a lot, they expose their arms, they might expose a lot of their body, maybe they wear tank tops. They could be someone who sees himself as athletic. And again, I want to make this clear. There's a difference between being something and seeing yourself as something. You can technically see yourself as something you're not. Some people might call that delusion, and sometimes delusion is actually a good thing. But this is what identity is. It's seeing yourself as something. Remember I said earlier, I don't know if it's still up. Identity is how you view yourself, right? So you could see someone who wears clothing as if they are someone who's athletic, like they might wear tank tops or super short shorts, the type of stuff that people who go to the gym a lot will wear, but they could be out of shape. But they might see themselves as someone who's in shape, or see themselves as someone who's getting in shape. Maybe they were someone who was 200 pounds and they lost a lot of weight. Now they're like 180, maybe still a little bit overweight by your standards, but by their standards, they lost a lot of weight. They feel good about themselves. They feel proud. They see themselves as someone who's athletic. That's all that matters. Maybe to you, they're not athletic. They see themselves as athletic. And the reason why the distinction is important is because when you see yourself a certain way, it dictates the path you move down. The person in this hypothetical scenario who was 200 to 300 pounds, who may have never worn shorts or tank tops because maybe they felt a certain way about their body, and as they lose weight, they begin to wear these new clothes. All it says is that they're going down a certain path, and the path is probably better health, probably higher fulfillment, higher self-esteem. Hopefully, you get the point that I'm making. So, what you want to do is, if you're trying to be the kind of person who acts their way into a new way of thinking, simply wear the uniform of the kind of person you're trying to become. It is that simple. It's truly that simple. So you're someone, for example, whose goal is to make six figures. In your mind, whether it's true or not, you have an idea of what the kind of person who makes six figures looks like. You have an idea of what that kind of person looks like. Perhaps that kind of person wears a suit. Perhaps that kind of person has good posture, haircut. I'm just listing things that I'm personally thinking of when I think of someone who makes six figures, even though this is not technically true of all people at all times, but we're just we're stereotyping, but to some degree, some stereotypes are a bit true. Suit, maybe they have good posture, maybe they have good haircut. What else? I'm trying to think of specifically clothing-based things. Their clothes are pressed, they're not wrinkled. If you're trying to become the kind of person, say for example, that makes six figures, just wear these things. Just do those things. You're someone who works at McDonald's. Okay, don't wear your McDonald's uniform all the time, because when you wear your McDonald's uniform, you condition yourself to believe that you're someone who's simply worthy of working at McDonald's. It's true. This is the reason why uniforms exist, by the way. Uniforms exist to install a certain identity upon you. And like I mentioned earlier, your identity is a set of different beliefs and values that you have. When you work at McDonald's and you wear the McDonald's uniform, you're essentially saying, I conform to the standards of McDonald's. That's what a uniform is. When you go to school, when you went to grade school, I went to a Catholic school. When I went to a Catholic school, you're supposed to wear a certain uniform. The uniform has certain colors and probably a logo based on that school. Why? Because the school is essentially saying, when you wear this uniform, and it's mandatory to wear this uniform, you're conforming to the way we think. You're conforming to the identity that's being installed upon you by us. When you wear an Eagles uniform or when you wear a Cowboys uniform, you're conditioning yourself to fall into the identity and the standards and the beliefs, the habits that's being placed upon you by that group, in this case, the football team. Hopefully it makes sense. So if you want to be the kind of person who makes more money, don't wear a McDonald's uniform. Don't wear things that people who work in lower level positions wear. Instead, wear things that upper class people wear, at least even stereotypically, that's fine. Wear a suit, have better posture. I know posture is not a clothing, but you get the point that I'm making. Get a haircut, iron your clothes. And if you're someone who's watching this right now and you really have no idea what the kind of person you want to become wears, I'll give you like a little strategy you can use to at least get a better idea. Use this technique. It's called inversion. And so basically what inversion is if you don't know what the kind of person you want to become does look like or does wear, look for the opposite and just don't do that, right? So typically, do rich people, let's say, in general, if you think of a rich person, do you think of someone who wears dirty clothing? Probably not. You probably think of more homeless people that wear dirty clothing. If you're trying to think of a rich person, do you typically think of bad posture? Probably not. You probably think of like good posture, or at least not bad posture. Do you typically think of wrinkled clothing? Probably not. Like these are probably all attributes that are for lower quality people or homeless people. So if you want to be someone who makes more money, then rule of inversion, look at all the homeless people and do the opposite of what they're doing, right? That's literally what this comes down to. Do the opposite of what the person you don't want to become is doing, so you don't get the results of the person you don't want to become. Hopefully that's not like super confusing, but yeah, that's essentially the gist of it. So my recommendation, figure out the kind of person you want to become. Figure out their uniform. And by uniform, basically what I mean is the thing that they stereotypically wear the most, the thing that they're associated with wearing. Wear it. And when you wear it, what I'm recommending you do, wear it for at least 1 month. Now, why do I suggest this? A lot of people, and this is true of myself, I did this to myself back in college. When you aren't conditioned to wear certain clothes, it feels uncomfortable to start wearing those clothes because it feels incongruent to who you are. It clashes with your identity. If I took a person, for example, who's super conservative, who's super like introverted and always in their shell, and I said to them, what we're going to do today is we're going to ditch the polo, we're going to ditch the khakis, and we're going to give you like a t-shirt or a tank top, maybe like a bomber jacket, something that makes you look a bit more liberal, a little bit less conservative. We're going to give you jeans and maybe some boots, make you look like some kind of I don't know, like Brad Pitt from Fight Club or something like that. Give you like a colorful button-up shirt actually picture Brad Pitt from Fight Club. It's probably the opposite of something liberal. We're going to take the polo from you and give you Brad Pitt's outfit from Fight Club, Tyler Durden. The kind of person who's conservative will try it on. They probably won't even try it on to begin with. But if you do get them to try it on, they're going to feel very uncomfortable because it's a clash of who they are. And that's going to happen. But what they need to do is they need to get over it and they need to kind of just wear it for about a month, because what's going to happen is as they kind of just force themselves into acting into this new way of thinking, when they see themselves in the mirror dressed like Tyler Durden, they'll begin to adopt the beliefs and the mindsets of Tyler Durden to a degree. And I'm not saying specifically Tyler Durden, but the kind of person who would wear that, they begin to adopt those beliefs, or that they begin to adopt those traits. And as they begin to adopt those traits, what typically happens, at least in my experience, what I've seen in other people, is the two personalities, the two kind of core values and beliefs and identities kind of integrate into each other and kind of combine, and you form a brand new identity. That's where the new identity comes from. So that's my recommendation. Now, one more quick thing I recommend you do. Again, this all falls in line with the idea of changing your clothing. You might have a goal that doesn't have let's call it an easily identifiable uniform. Say, for example, your goal is not just to make six figures, or that's not really like the core of your goal. Say, for example, you're the kind of person who wants to just be let's just be a little bit general, more charming person. But you don't know what that looks like. Like, what does a charming person, say you're a guy, what does a charming male wear? How do I become that identity? What I recommend you do, and what I've recommended people do, find people who fit the personality type or who fit the goal that you want to become, right? Find people like that and just look at what they wear and copy them. Copy them. Copy the way they dress. And as a bonus, copy the way they behave. That comes as a part of copying what they wear, because if you're copying an individual based on what they wear, you're probably going to copy the way they act as well, because you're just mimicking them. But copy the things that they wear. I'll give you an example. I'll give you two examples about myself when I did these steps myself and applied them into my own life. First time I did this, I was about 17, and this time it was forced upon me. I was about 17 years old, super shy, super conservative. I was in college. I never drank before. And I remember, I think I was like 17 or 18, never drank before, was in college, super conservative, super shy. And I remember I was at a party. And up until this point, all the parties I had gone to, I was always in the corner, and I would always just drink water and just kind of be like scared and timid. And I'm sure people looked at me like, oh my God, this guy's so introverted. And I was introverted. And a roommate of mine, I remember at one party, I used to always wear kind of like button-up shirts and like kind of like polos, but they were similar to polos, but they had more buttons in like the top three. I'd wear those, but I would always button them up to the very top, always. And my roommate said to me, he was like, dude, why are you buttoning up all your like buttons? He was like, let loose a little bit, unbutton at least two of those, show some chest. And so like he just unbuttoned the top two. And really for the first 2 weeks, I started unbuttoning my shirts, and it felt super uncomfortable. And then after a while, I just kept unbuttoning my shirts. And it sounds super basic. It sounds super simple, but it trickled down into the way I started to dress in general. I started to dress more liberally in general, and I started getting more comfortable in general. And it was around this time that I started to actually drink, and even though I was technically underage, but that was a long time ago. Doesn't matter now. But that was around the time I started to like actually drink, and I started to get a lot more extroverted. I started doing more clubs. It leads to a trickle down effect, because you start to see yourself as a different type of person. Before, I saw myself as the introverted dude that needed to button up his shirt to always feel safe and always feel comfortable. Once I stopped doing that, once I started to expose myself a little bit more, I started to feel more comfortable in this new version of myself. I started to act a different way, and it changed my thoughts. I started to act a way into a new way of thinking, and that led to me behaving completely different. And that carried on. And clearly it's still working to this day. So that was one scenario in which this happened. There was a second time this happened. This was probably around when I was 21, 22-ish. I forget exactly how old I was. Basically, at this point, I was trying to take my extroversion up a notch. And I was trying to kind of make more friends, meet more people. But the problem was at this time, around the age of 21, 22, long story short, if you're not someone who's watched my channel, or if you're not someone who knows me that well, I got kicked out of college twice. And the problem with getting kicked out of college twice, there's many problems. One of the problems is that all your friends graduate before you. So when they graduate, you're left with no friends at a college campus by yourself. And one of the remedies to my problem was I wanted to learn how to just meet random people, which meant I needed to approach random people, and ideally do it without being drunk. So I actually remember these brand new people and actually get their Instagram or get their phone number, follow up with them, and actually meet them to, for other things, and talk with them in a coherent way where they actually like me. So what I did is I kind of use the technique I just shared with you. If you don't know, if your goal is like a bit more, I won't call it vague, but not something that's easily replicable or not something that's super stereotypical, you can find someone who acts the way you can find someone who acts the way you want to act. And so in this situation, what I did is there's a TV show I was watching at the time. Don't judge me for this. It's a fantastic TV show called Californication. Main character is this guy named Hank Moody. And Hank Moody was very charming, very charismatic, could kind of crack like jokes super easily, but they felt natural. And I wanted to act that way. I wanted to be like him. And so what I did is I literally copied his wardrobe. Now, funny enough, I still, to this day, wear his wardrobe. And what is his wardrobe? If you watch Californication, you can just look up pictures of him on Google Images. He wears basically the same thing in essentially every episode. He wears a white or black t-shirt, a necklace, a watch. Sometimes he wears like bracelets, which I don't have one right now, but I usually do wear those things. Jeans, sometimes a leather jacket, and Chelsea boots. That's his outfit. That was his outfit for like all 5 or 6 seasons. So what do I start wearing? White t-shirt or black t-shirt, Chelsea boots, jeans, leather jacket, necklace, watch, bracelets. I still wear these to this day, by the way. But the point that I'm making is by me wearing those things, when I was talking to people, when I was associating with people, initially, I would actively think of Hank Moody and think of like, oh, what would he say in the situation? And just try to mimic him. And then eventually you stop thinking about what that person would do and you just start doing those things naturally. Not exactly like him, of course, because you're, like I said, you're mixing the new personality with the old personality to create a brand new personality. But you start to mix the two together. And that's how you end up creating a brand new identity. So that is my suggestion to you. If you want to create, a brand new identity, you have to understand that your identity is what dictates the path you take in life. You can change your identity, and you should change your identity, but it's an active endeavor. If you don't do it actively, other people will change your identity for you. Then you get to issues kind of like the labeling theory, like we talked about, where you can go down a path that you might not actively want to go down, but that's the cost of you not actively changing your identity. And the simplest thing to do, if you really want to change your identity, find someone who's at the destination that you want to get to, or someone who's relatively close, and just dress the way they dress. You dress the way they dress because dressing is relatively easy. It's very low barrier, and you can see changes very quickly that way. Why do we do this? Because you need to act your way into a new way of thinking instead of trying to think your way into a new way of acting. Make sense? Cool. If that did, hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in the next module where we'll be talking about some of the more tactical aspects of achieving success. So hope you enjoyed the video. Hope to see you in the next one. Peace out. Bye.